Hello and welcome to our third live Q&A session. My name is Jean and I coordinate the marketing here at John Packer. I'm speaking to you from my home in Taunton, and Denis Wick, our very special guest tonight, is joining us from his home in Oxshott in Surrey. Tonight's event should be streaming live to Facebook, and whether you're watching in Zoom or on Facebook, it would be great if you could just let me know that you can hear me okay with a raised hand. Oh yes. We've had so many questions sent in, but do feel free to ask any more via the question function in the toolbar at the bottom of Zoom or on Facebook. I will be monitoring questions and I will squeeze what I can in at the end. Now, a quick favour, if you are watching on Facebook and have any friends that you think should be watching, it would be great if you could just do a quick share that we're live, because tonight's event is going to contain lots of very useful information about Denis Wick products, finding the best mouthpiece, technique, and not to mention interesting and occasionally amusing stories from Denis's rich life. From all the questions we've received and all the enthusiasm for tonight's event, it's pretty obvious that Denis Wick has been an inspiration to many, and I don't think it's any exaggeration to describe him as a living legend. His innovative products have shaped the sound of brass, and surely every brass musician has a Denis Wick product. With roughly 750 products now in production and a worldwide customer base, Denis is very humble about his achievements. When we've spoken in the lead up to tonight's event, he said numerous times, I was just in the right place at the right time. I think, though, that without Denis's ingenuity, that spark of inspiration would be lost on many. So a big welcome to everyone seizing an opportunity here at the right place at the right time. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to present Denis. Welcome, welcome. Right, well, we're going to get started now. So obviously a lot of people will be here because they have a Denis Wick product, but many will be here because of your career as a trombonist with the LSO for an incredible 31 years. I'd like to start with questions about your years as a musician, followed by some practical tips for brass technique, product advice, and then some bonus ones at the end. So we've had some similar ones sent in, so I'm going to amalgamate some of them. I won't be able to name check everybody that's asked a question, but Esther Greaves and Grace Greaves both wanted to know how and why did you start playing the trombone as opposed to any other brass instrument, and who introduced you to it?
Well, it's a long story. I was born in a little town in Essex called Braintree. My father worked in a builder's merchants. They sold building products. Well, the war came and there was no building. So my father was out of work virtually. And so he tried to think about what he could do. So his elder brother, my Uncle Ted, worked for the Salvation Army as, as an insurance superintendent, I think was the word. And they had what they called assurance. So we moved from Braintree to Chelmsford, where my father could work for the Salvation Army Assurance, which he did. And we all became Salvationists overnight. And here was I at the age of 10, I think, maybe 11. And I was given a trombone. Well, the reason was that my dad always said, that's a lovely tune there, boy. It sounds good on the trombone. That was his best compliment to any piece of music, that it would sound good on the trombone. Well, I didn't know what a trombone was, but they gave me a trombone and it didn't work. It had been damaged. So they sent it away to be repaired. Now, my dad played the baritone in the band at Chancellor Salvation Army. He was second baritone. So I borrowed his baritone and learned to play it. And I actually took it to school. I was in the top class of the junior school, a very, very good junior school. Molsham Boys, it was called.
Oh, right.
And they had a music master there who was our form master. And his name was Gardiner, and known as, for some reason, as Daddy Gardiner. And he made us work so hard. Every evening we had homework, and it was an examination, an actual examination paper for what was then called the scholarship exam. It was later called the 11 plus. So out of the total form of about 25 boys, all 25 got into the grammar school. And the grammar school at Chelmsford was a very good one. They called it KEGS, King Edward's Grammar School. It was one formed by I think Edward VI, lost in the mists of history. Anyway, so I was well set up, and I had a very good first year, and it was alphabetical, so being a W, I was in 1C, and we had, so far, we'd not been affected by the war very much, but suddenly, on one night, the Blitz hit Chelmsford, and we used to go down to an air raid shelter when the alert was on, the siren went, and I went down to the air raid shelter with my parents and my little sister, and we waited until they sounded what was called the all clear, which meant that you were okay. Well, Chelmsford was blitzed on that day, on that night rather, and I remember vividly cycling to school the next day, and what had been rows and rows of houses were just rubbish. It was just blitzed. And it was a bit scary.
Mm.
And my mother, who was much older than my father and a real brain, she was marvelous. She had been, she'd worked in Canada as an officer in the Salvation Army. And so we all moved to Chelmsford. We all became Salvationists again. And I think I told you that part, yes. And then I played in the band at Chelmsford.
And so was there a teacher that you had on the trombone, or did you have to teach yourself?
I didn't have any teachers.
So how did you do it? How did you? Because there's such a feel to the instrument. You know, you've got to know where to go with slide positions. How did you work it out?
Well, I worked it out for myself.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we, oh, excuse me.
That's okay.
We after that blitz, it was my mother decided that we had to move away from the city, so we moved to Yorkshire. And my father had a job looking after a housing estate at a place called Dunsville, which is between Doncaster and Thorn. So I transferred to Thorn Grammar School, and they did a performance of, what was it, Gilbert and Sullivan? Yes, it was Iolanthe. And the headmaster sang the part of Strephon, the hero in Iolanthe. And because they discovered I could play the trombone, I had to learn bass clef. Because as you probably know, sorry about this.
It's okay. Take your time.
I have a drink. As you probably know, in the brass band, the trombone is always in treble clef. Mm. But of course, in the orchestra, it's in bass clef.
Did it take you long to learn it?
Well, my father taught me it a whole tone out, so he got it completely wrong.
Gosh.
But then I discovered that it was wrong, and then managed to get it right. But the tone out that way of doing it came back to me many, many years later when I was in the London Symphony Orchestra playing euphonium parts of Richard Strauss, which were transposed bass clef. It did come in handy, but that was about 25 years later.
Right. So did you have any was there a trombonist that particularly influenced you? Did you see somebody and go, I'd like to, play like that person? Or
well, not really. Having worked on my father's baritone, so I could play, and I did a solo at school, and the Daddy Gardner organised me to play the solo, and I had the Salvation Army band tune book, which was, I think, a solo cornet or first cornet. Wow. So I played the Bluebells of Scotland very, very gently, and Daddy Gardner started to look at the music and started to accompany me a tone out, because he didn't realise that it was a transposed part.
Oh, no.
So he quickly cottoned onto that. He was a very clever man.
Wow.
And so that was my first initiation into playing this solo on the baritone at school. After the Blitz in Chelmsford, we moved up to Yorkshire, and we were there for, I suppose, about a year. While we were there, I had a very bad bout of flu, which got worse and worse and was life-threatening for a couple of weeks, septicemia.
Oh,
and
gosh.
so it was decided that we should move away from Yorkshire to the cold Yorkshire winters and come south again. So we did, and we landed up in Luton. Well, I transferred to Luton Grammar School, excuse me, and at the age of 13, became the first trombone player of Luton Temple Salvation Army Band. I wasn't allowed to march, which suited me fine,
Right.
but I became the first trombone in this men's band, because people were called up, national service, and they were just a bit short-handed at that time. Mm-hmm. So I was playing in that band and reading everything new, and it was a good band, and the conductor was quite an elderly chap, but very good, also a very good pianist. And I used to play solos for the Salvation Army all over the place, and they called it specialing, I seem to remember.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
so yeah,
the things changed, and I was at Luton Grammar School, and the music master there was a fellow from South Africa, and he spoke with a South African accent like that. And his name was Ronald Bridger, and he was wonderful because he told me things I got no idea about associated board exams. I didn't know what they were, and he sort of got me to take the grade examinations, and the top grade for trombone was grade 7, not 8, grade 7.
Interesting.
And I got the highest marks in the whole country.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
It was called the gold medal, but of course there was no gold. And I had a set of books as a prize, which of course I still got. So Ronald Bridger got me to take an LTCL, which is a diploma from Trinity College. Mm-hmm. I did, and I was going to Cambridge. I was going to, that was the university to go to.
Yeah.
However, the entire class of about 15 of us failed Latin.
Oh, no.
So we couldn't go to university.
Gosh.
So September 1949 saw me ascending the steps of the Royal Academy of Music. Now, at the Royal Academy of Music, the trombone professor was a chap called Sidney Langston. And he was a good player, very good player. But it was his wish. He actually said, and he said it to me many years later, "Why should I tell these kids my secrets? They'll be doing my work next week." So he wouldn't tell anybody anything. But for some reason, which I've never discovered, there was a comedian come violinist come conductor called Vic Oliver, who was originally from Vienna, I believe. And he conducted a TV date at Alexandra Palace. And I was booked to play second trombone to Sid.
Right.
And I worked over about 2.5, 3 days rehearsing, and sitting beside Sid was the best lesson I could possibly have had, and I copied him absolutely.
So you managed to like learn from him.
Yes.
Yes, that way.
But and it was a marvelous experience. So, excuse me, I learned more in those 2 days than I could have ever learned any other way.
That's interesting because we've actually had a question. I think I was going to actually ask it later on, but I think that perhaps answers one of the questions we had is graduate level education really necessary for a working musician? And maybe it isn't. It's got that practical experience of playing.
It's very different now.
Yes, I suppose, perhaps.
Well, let me tell you what happened to me.
Mm.
I was booked to go and play in an amateur orchestra in Salisbury by an old friend of mine, Donald Froud, who's a horn player. We were both students at the academy. So I went down to Salisbury and played second in this orchestra. And the guy playing first was a chap called Tom Hodgkiss. And he was first trombone in the old Bournemouth Municipal Orchestra. And I had a whole lot of music which he didn't have. That was before photocopying. At the back of our house, where we lived in Luton, was a German prisoner of war camp.
Right.
When I used to practice, which I did about 6 hours a day when I was at home,
Gosh.
I had an audience of these prisoners. And my kid sister, my sister Coral, who was born in 1934, January, fell out of the apple tree and cut her leg rather badly.
Oh dear.
Well, because these German soldiers, they were just, they got nothing to do.
Mm.
They were just sitting there, or standing there mainly, listening to me. And the camp doctor came and knocked on the door.
Mm.
And he was a German doctor. His name was Dr. Plump. I always remember that.
Yeah.
And he looked after my sister, but turns out he was a cellist.
Oh.
So I introduced him to the various people that I knew, amateur musicians in Luton. And he was very grateful, and he sent me a whole lot of trombone music from Germany.
Oh, fantastic!
I remember that, and it was the paper was wartime paper, and it was like toilet paper. It was so thin.
Gosh.
And I still have that music somewhere.
You still have it? Wow.
I think so, anyway.
Yeah.
So. I introduced him to the players in the amateur orchestras and so on in Luton. The next thing that happened was that it was suggested that I might like to play with a Luton band. So that did seem a good idea. So meanwhile, I had managed to buy a new British trombone called an Imperial, Boozy and Hawkes Imperial trombone. And it had, oh, I'm sorry about this.
Oh no, that's okay, don't worry about it. Have a good drink. Gets us sometimes, doesn't it?
So I had bought this trombone from a fellow student at the academy. And it had a thing like a golf ball and a semiquaver sticking out of it, and as a balance weight.
Right. Okay.
Those instruments are long forgotten, and probably just as well too. And I got a low pitch trombone, playing in a high-pitched brass band. So what the hell could I do? So I pulled it out, the tuning slide, an extra 2.5 inches, and put it into sharp pitch A,
Right.
and then transposed everything up a semitone. Now that sounds very hard, but it wasn't as hard as all that, because all the brass band music was written in flat keys.
Yes.
So I just played everything semitone up. And if it was an A flat, well, I mean, if it was in 2 flats, which is B flat, well, that's really concert pitch, it's A flat. So I played it in A major, 3 sides.
You're very good at transposition.
Well, it was dead easy, actually. Yeah. I mean, I had to work hard at it to start with. And I remember the conductor, Albert Coop, who'd been a professional trumpet player, dictating a chord at the end of a piece because we changed something. He said, "Oh, I don't know what the hell you're going to play." So I said, "Don't worry, I'll think of something." and so that's what happened. Now, I had a telegram from, well, it said, "We have vacancy for second trombone. Are you interested to audition?" Words exactly. Signed, Rudolf Schwartz, conductor, Bournemouth Municipal Orchestra. Was I? So I went down there and I went to Bournemouth and I did an audition. And Tom Hotchkiss, first trombone, who played in silent pictures.
Right.
Until they became the Talkies, and then he joined the police force in Sunderland and played in the police band. But he had excellent high register and a terrible low register. But I mean, he was a professional player, and he made sure I did everything the way he liked, which is very good training. He was 19. And we were playing a concert with the Rhenish Symphony of Schumann. It was a very difficult first trombone part, alto trombone. Nobody had ever seen an alto trombone, but you had to play alto trombone parts on the tenor trombone. And the interval seemed to be going on forever. In the rehearsal, I mean. And suddenly we heard a noise. It was screaming. Like that. And then we were all quiet.
What's going on?
What's going on? And it was Rudolf Schwartz screaming at Hotchkiss, "Get out of this building!" Screaming at him. Well, we were going to play 3 lovely little pieces by Beethoven for 4 trombones called Equari. And there was a local trombone player because they couldn't afford to get somebody from London.
Right.
And his name was Charlie Bishop. And he was known as the Bishop of Christchurch because he came from Christchurch and his name was Charlie Bishop.
Okay.
And we were sort of waiting on the stage and he comes up and sees the first trombone. "Yeah, I'm not playing that bleeding part." and so I have 5 seconds notice to play one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire on first trombone. Which I just about managed to do, just about. It was a hell of a struggle. Anyway, that was in the morning. It was a Saturday. They did 3 concerts a week in Bournemouth.
Wow.
Yes. The Thursday was the big one. And they usually had 2 rehearsals on Wednesday.
So it was always, was it new repertoire every week then?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
So, 2 rehearsals on Wednesday, concert Thursday, rehearsal on Friday, 1 rehearsal on Friday, concert Saturday, concert Sunday.
Blimey.
Sunday was light music, so-called. That was Eric Coates and people like that, you see. And so I became the first trombone player at 5 seconds notice to play one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire. And then it went on and I stayed playing first trombone because what had happened, I don't know, But Schwartz was screaming at hostages to get out of this building.
Yeah, I wonder what he'd done.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Schwartz had been rescued within inches of his death from Auschwitz.
Right.
He was in Auschwitz.
Yeah, gosh.
And he had a terrible time. They'd broken both his shoulders when they found out he was a conductor.
Oh, that's so cruel.
I mean, you can't believe it, but
Yeah.
anyway, he didn't speak English. He had no idea about the job in Bournemouth, and he saw an advert. He was rescued by the Swedish Red Cross from Auschwitz right at the end of the war, and he married his nurse. And Greta was this very tall, blonde Swedish lady, became Mrs. Schwartz, and Frau Schwartz, and they saw an advert for the job conducting the Bournemouth Municipal Orchestra. So he came to Bournemouth and auditioned for it, and the orchestra thought he was wonderful, which he was.
Yes.
And he didn't speak any English,
Yeah.
so he had to learn fast.
Yeah. Wow. What?
He was the best trainer one could have. He used to say, he would explain why in that chord the third horn must be louder than the first trombone, but in this chord the first trombone must come up. And it was basically explaining about music. And he got into terrible trouble for it, actually, when he was conducting the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which was his next job, because they didn't want to be told all these things, but I did, because I was 19. I'd never had any proper tuition at the academy.
No. So yes, we should probably think about talking about how then you ended up at the LSO. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We need to get there as well.
Yeah, sorry,
yes. Oh no. It's all. There's so many fantastic stories.
Well,
I just wanted to.
The Birmingham Orchestra, conducted by I can't remember his name. He's a Canadian bloke who George Hurst. That's right. George Hurst conducted the LSO. Conducted the Birmingham Orchestra, and we did the Schubert C Major Symphony. We used to call it the C Monster because it was so big.
Okay.
And so he was conducting the C Monster, and of course we'd done it with Schwartz. It's lovely for the trombones. You're not just noisemakers. You're very much integrated with the orchestra. So he was. We played this. He must have run all the way around the back of the Birmingham Town Hall and greeted the trombone section as we came down the steps at the back. The trombones were wonderful. And I thought, well, that's very nice. It's a pity the LPO didn't think so, because he was assistant conductor in the National Philharmonic. So, you would play for us? So I said, well, that's why I applied for the job. So I got a telegram, which I've still got, from the LPO, and it was arranged that I should go and play for them. And I did. It was very carefully arranged. And Audrey, my first wife, she died in '92. She'd been a solicitor secretary. She said, "Don't sign anything." Okay. So I didn't, and they gave me the contract, and I put it in my pocket and thanked them, got the train back to Birmingham. So then I had an extraordinary, so that was on a Friday. On the Saturday, I had a telephone call from the guy who was the manager of the London Symphony Orchestra, Eugene Cruft, offering me the chance to audition.
Right.
So I went and auditioned for the LSO, and it was total disorganization. I'd never seen anything like it. A few back desk fiddle players, as I discovered, were on the board of directors, which is a kind of self-protecting organization. They wanted to look after each other.
Mm.
Anyway, that's another story. But I took over the situation, and Barry Tuckwell, who died just recently, marvelous horn player, it was he that proposed me for the LSO.
Oh, right.
So I took over the situation and played all the excerpts that I would be expected to play from memory, just played them.
Yep.
So I got a telephone call offering me the job. So I didn't know which one to pick. I didn't know what to do.
How did you decide?
Well, Audrey, bless her, she said, go and ask Uncle Rudy.
So,
We didn't actually call him Uncle Rudy, but
okay.
we went. I called up Schwarz.
Oh, right. Schwarz, yeah.
And he said, in 1 year, you will tell. It would be so much better. They have this, and all the sort of best players in the LSO, as was, they had a revolution 18 months before. And all the best players had left and formed a new orchestra called the Symphonia of London. And if you look at some of the old films that were made about that time, music by the Symphonia of London.
Right.
There's these guys who'd been in the LSO. So what the LSO did, there was a back desk cellist, Harry Dugard. His name was Jones, really. Harry Dugard Jones, but he dropped the Jones and called himself Harry Dugard. And he booked brilliant young players, Joes de Pire, Alex Murray, flute, Joes de Pire, clarinet, Barry Tuckwell, horn. And we had this new LSO, and it gradually got better and better and better and busier and busier.
Yeah.
And we were never paid salaries, you see.
Oh, right.
And I believe it's still the same. I'm not sure about that, but we would just pay for what we did. So if you were in everything, you got paid. And if as a trombone player, they were doing Mozart, hard luck, mate.
Right.
So, that was
Yeah.
my big jump into the LSO.
Yeah. Great. Right, I'm going to try and squeeze some more questions in because I've still got quite a few. I want to just kind of
Yes.
Okay. Well, we had a question about the Gordon Jacob Trombone Concerto.
Yeah.
How were you involved with that?
1955, Rudolf Schwarz did it as a present to me. He persuaded Gordon Jacob to write this piece, and Schwarz did it. And his quote was, "To give him some limelight." That was his expression.
Yeah, fantastic. So, did you work with him? Like, did he want to know your particular sort of strengths of playing?
Well, he lived at Brockenhurst, and Audrey's people lived at Southbourne, which was near Christchurch. Right? So I went to see him. He couldn't speak properly. I think he had no roof to his mouth, or some kind of
dear.
spoke like that. And he said, he gave me his house was next to a pub called the Crown. I thought it was the Rose and Crown, but it wasn't. It's called the Cloud. And he's still there in Brockenhurst. Anyway, I eventually found him, and he was marvelous. He showed me the music, and I said, I think this is a bit, there's rather a lot of it. It's rather difficult. So he said, well, let's take that out and put that and change things. And he said, look, well, you could put that one back. And he gradually built it up again. It finished up the way it began.
Oh, right, okay.
So there I had it. And it was marvelous because it received a lot of publicity.
Yes, yeah, I've seen there's lots of recordings of it now as well.
Well, I did one with the Norwegian Radio Orchestra, but I didn't ever do one with the LSO. Anyway, that was how that all started, and I joined the LSO and stayed there 31 years.
Great career. So I've got a question about what was the thinking behind the sovereign B flat and F tenor with a removable F section?
Well, I didn't ever do that. but I was never involved in anything like that.
No, okay. And is it true that Super F was just another note when you were first in the CBSO?
But Super F?
Super F.
Oh, well, I could always play high notes.
Yeah.
I could play bolero an octave higher.
So could you tell us about your early trips to the US and how you brought that large bore instrument back into the UK? I like this story.
Let's see. It was actually illegal to import foreign instruments and foreign cars until, I think, the end of '58. Well, I had a neighbor who came from Brussels, and she was a lovely lady, I suppose a bit older than me, but not much. And she was very interested in me, used to listen to me practicing and so on. And I got in touch with the music shop in Brussels. They actually had American instruments. And they got a con trombone for me. Well, the con 8/8 trombone we became aware of it when the New York Philharmonic came and played in the Edinburgh Festival, which I think was probably about 57 or 8. Not sure exactly when, but we'd never heard a sound like that. Nobody had. And I located this instrument, and the LSO were playing in Brussels. We were playing as an international exhibition. So we gave a concert, and I seem to remember we had an audience of about 20 for this concert. And the orchestra went off to look at the trade exhibition thing, which was quite something. And I persuaded Barry Chuckle and Stuart Nusson, principal bass, to come with me to go to visit this shop. And Barry said, it just sounds like you, only more so. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Such a perfect instrument. And it had the most glamorous looking case. Beautifully done. So the chap in the shop said, look, don't take this case.
No.
And they got some brown paper and string and wrapped it up very carefully and very safely, packed it with corrugated cardboard, you know, and gave me this thing wrapped up in brown paper. So I gave it to the customs and said, I've got this trombone. He said, what is it? I said, I don't know. What did you pay for it? And so I said, what, 50 quid, you see? That should cost me 110.
Oh, gosh.
So they charged me duty and gave me the slip and didn't take the number on it or anything. Very disorganized.
Yep.
And then the lady who lived next door, who came from Brussels, brought the proper case through, and she was stopped by the customs people.
Oh, really?
And she'd filled it full of baby clothes and her underwear.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so she said, just a few odds and ends. So they opened it, and there it was.
Yeah. So do you still have that trombone?
No, I sold it a long time ago.
Oh. So what trombone do you play now?
I don't play.
You don't play?
I finished playing years ago.
Okay.
Vanity, really. I didn't want to be remembered as someone that we should have heard him years ago. I thought I'd quit. And, you know, I've done my share.
Yeah.
Curiously enough, I did try not too long ago, and it felt terrible. And I tried again 10 minutes later, and it was all there.
Wow.
Yeah.
just need a good warm-up. Right. So when you were playing, did you ever play the acrobat with a brass band?
No.
I mean, you've recounted so many stories. I'm not going to. I don't know if you've had a particular most memorable event playing the trombone, or someone's asked for the wackiest musical experience you ever had. So I don't know, you know, if there's any particular poignant event that.
Well,
it's all.
I remember doing the Mahler Second Symphony with Lenny Bernstein in what was it? Ely Cathedral, which is absolutely wonderful experience. because he obviously felt that music very, very personally. And it was an extraordinary experience for all of us, and you can still hear that on YouTube.
Right, I shall look at that.
One or two with Yellowstone and Bernstein. But, you know, one did everything. I also played in a dance band when I was in the Birmingham Orchestra, and I knew a little bit about it, and it was very useful because if ever we had anything like that, I wasn't thought to be capable of or whatever, but I learned to do it.
Yep.
So that was always good fun, and I used to surprise people when that happened. But you know, my career as a trombone player was, I had another piece written for me. In fact, I think I had 3 or 4 pieces written for me altogether, and did a premiere, you know. And there's a lovely concerto for trombone and brass band by a chap called Buxton Orr, O-R-R. Marvellous piece. And I don't think anybody's ever played it apart from me.
Oh, well, we should bring it out to retirement.
It's not easy. You know, it's a really good piece. But, you know, I think I did my innings as a trombone player, and I've got lots of marvellous memories.
Yes, lots. Well, let me carry on with a few more. So, John wanted to know, what is the earliest age at which it would be realistic to introduce children to brass instruments? What's your thoughts on that?
When their second teeth are developed, that's obviously the most important thing. And you can buy those little plastic instruments from what is it, Warwick Music. They're very light.
Yeah.
And that's an ideal instrument for a kid to start on.
And I suppose just listening to brass instruments and watching people have lessons and doing observations, you've already said how beneficial that is as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
you can learn without actually playing, definitely. So was Tommy Dorsey's high register work a bad influence for young trombonists?
Well, I had a recording of 3 moods of Dorsey, and I got the music and copied it, and I could do it more or less the same. But it was interesting because that vocal style of playing in the high register with a small bore trombone, a small mouthpiece, and a slight vibrato, it's a bit difficult to change that to a large bore instrument and a big mouthpiece because the sound's rather different. But you know, it was tremendous fun in all the bits of playing that I did, and there was a chap called Arthur Wilson who was going to be promoted to first trombone in the Philharmonia Orchestra. He was second. He was, I reckon, the best second trombone player ever. And he was so worried about playing in the high register. So I suggested he got himself a good alto trombone, one of the German makes in the day, and learned to play it. And he became brilliant at it and solved all his problems.
So we've had quite a lot of questions from people asking to improve their range on the upper and the lower. So I think everyone seems to have issues one or the other. Are there any specific exercises that you find helpful for both that you use for?
A good exercise to play in the low register is to play a low B flat and do a lip slur down to pedal B flat without moving the slide, just like that. And it shows you what the body should be doing. See, the body's a bit stupid, and it has to learn by copying. And as for playing in the high register, the main thing is not to press too hard and not to stretch the top lip. It needs to be puckered, like that.
Right.
Yes,
fantastic. Wow, great stuff. So just those 2 exercises will help improve your range.
Yes.
And so what about tips on improving tone and developing different tones for different styles of music? Would you do you need to change a mouthpiece to for
No,
different types of
the
music?
best thing, I mean, to open the low register, use one of my practice notes. Those are the black ones.
Hmm.
And it's almost difficult, it's almost impossible to make much sound at all. But practice in the low register and play as loudly as you can. I mean, ridiculously loudly. And it opens the throat spaces. And I can do this now if I breathe in this way. It makes a bit of my voice go down, as you can hear.
Yeah.
And it does the same thing when you open the back of the throat, and it improves the sound so much.
So when you're practicing with it, you need to use a practice mute to help you rather than just trying to not annoy your neighbours. Really, you need to use it.
Well, yes, it's a special technique.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Steve Elliott wants to know, where can he get more air from? So perhaps he might find helpful to do that kind of practice, and then he might discover that air that he's been.
The main thing is to get the air as far down as you can, and to open the back of the throat as much as possible, so that then you use the muscles in the stomach to push the air out, and that seems to work pretty well.
Great stuff. So I'm just going to ask some questions about mouthpieces now, and how you came to do the mouthpiece, because obviously the mouthpieces came before the mutes. So John Charles is a very satisfied user of a Ultra 1.5 CH trombone, but is curious to know how and why you moved into the specialist world of mouthpiece production. And yeah, lots of people asking about how do you design a mouthpiece, and
well,
so
you have to start from somewhere. I had the great thing about the mouthpieces that we all used, which is now sold by Selmer, and there's the old Vincent Bach mouthpieces. Now, Vincent Bach was actually a Viennese trumpet player who emigrated to New York in about 1921. And he became, he started doing instrument repairs and copying people's mouthpieces. And eventually, he became quite big time at it and started making his own mouthpieces and then his own instruments.
Right.
And it was very interesting, because when I had my Bach mouthpieces, they were never two were never the same. The machinery they used in those days, I had one particular one that I liked, the 4G, and I had 7, and they were all different. So, and it was a bit embarrassing by today's standards.
Yeah, yeah.
I realized that the 4G was a bit too big, this one was a bit too small, and we were rehearsing in St Pancras Town Hall, and John Iveson, who's now retired as a trombone player, but was a very, very good player, was playing second, I think, and the trombones weren't needed for an hour, so we just stretched our legs, went down the road, and we found a shop which was owned by the Salvation Army. And so there was an old-fashioned 19th century euphonium mouthpiece in a euphonium, and I asked if they would sell me the mouthpiece.
Right.
So they did, for about £2. And that became the basis. It had the most wonderful cup in it. You see, the inside of the mouthpiece has a cup.
Oh, just, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah.
And the curve and the shape is absolutely crucial. So I had found this old mouthpiece. The rim was terrible, so I got an engineer to put a thread on it, and I had a screw rim to go onto it, and that was the way I made my first trombone mouthpiece, and it was almost perfect. And we were in New York, and there was a chap there. I'll remember his name in a minute. The Italian name. Had a music shop, and I used to buy American instruments from him and bring them back and sell them to my students. Because
Right.
when you pay duty on them, they were much cheaper doing it that way.
Oh, okay.
And so Giardinelli, that's right, that's his name. And Bob said, have you got it right yet? So I said, well, almost. He said, give it to me, show me. So he said, un momento. Goes into the back of where there's a lathe, brings it back. He's taken a sliver of metal out. An absolute sliver of metal.
Yeah.
And he goes, now try it. Wow!
Perfect.
It was perfect. And that's how I made my first mouthpiece. And people said, when you get it right, because we were all playing the same kinds of instruments.
Yeah.
People said, when you get it right, can I have one? And I've still got the list over there of the people that had the first round of mouthpieces. And I found this old guy that had a lathe and was known as a mouthpiece maker, old Bill Cox. So he said, how many do you want? So I said, oh, dozen, 20 maybe. Oh, it's expensive. I couldn't guarantee that it'll be the same. I might as well make a former tool, and you could have 100. It wouldn't cost you any more. So I thought, okay, maybe 100.
Yeah.
Then I thought, what have I done? 100 mouthpieces. So that's how it began. And so eventually people knew about the mouthpieces and bought them. Then I made a slightly smaller one, and I found a pre-war mouthpiece from about 1936, which had belonged to my former teacher, Sid Langston.
Oh, wow.
And it was an instrument he was selling. And this boy came to me for lessons after, because Sid couldn't teach toffee. And this lad came for lessons, and I borrowed his mouthpiece that Sid had left in the instrument. Mm. And that became the 6BS.
Oh, interesting.
And it was named, there were two brothers in New York called Clark. One was a trumpet player and a trombone player. And this was called a Clark Large in the old catalogue. So, I mean, it started in the most haphazard way. And you know, it just happened in the way that it did.
So when you create a new mouthpiece now, do you see that there's a problem that needs a mouthpiece to fix it? Or, you know, how do you go about doing it?
The most important thing is that the mouthpiece has to suit the instrument. That's metal to metal. You can't change that. The human body can get used to anything.
Okay.
So the most important thing is that and of course we've got Stephen Mead sort of working for us, if you like. Mm-hmm. And he's based in Manchester, and he keeps designing new mouthpieces, which are just very small variations on what exists already. And you know that you can do anything. You know.
Yeah.
The temptation is to think, if only I did that or this with an mouthpiece, I'd be playing better. And of course, it's nonsense. Well, there's only one way to play better: practice.
Yep. Definitely. So what prompted the idea to create the flat-rimmed mouthpiece, the Heritage, which were commonplace in the 60s?
Well, I know what it was. I saw a museum in Bexhill, or somewhere down in Sussex, which had got some old instruments in it. And it had extraordinary, these antique instruments and a tuba with mouthpieces where under the rim it was paper thin, and as it went down it was heavier at the base. And I discovered that this was a fantastic result. It gave us such response, you just breathe into it, and
yeah,
it absolutely securely. So with a range of mouthpieces, and I didn't know what to call them. And I had a friend called Cagaris, Vernon Cagaris, that's right. He was the editor of the International Trombone Association magazine. And Jan, his wife, was another trombone player. And I used to stay with them when I went to America, into Florida. And that was marvelous. And they were always so kind to me. So he's died now, unfortunately. And he suggested calling them. Oh, sorry, what am I doing? Calling them heritage, because he said that's what you've got is the heritage of the old system, which it is.
Yeah.
And just under the rim, it's 0.5 millimetre thin.
Gosh, so small.
And then flat as it goes down after that. So it's very, very responsive.
Yeah. So for a student, that wouldn't be necessarily an instrument, a mouthpiece for an that wouldn't necessarily be the mouthpiece for a beginner then.
Well, yes, it could.
It could be. It could be.
Yes, because it's very easy, very responsive.
Right. Right. Okay. Because we had some questions about, how do you find the right mouthpiece for your own sort of personal sort of embouchure? So.
Well.
Okay, that's not really just finding for the right one.
You have to keep looking.
Yes.
And you find one, and when it's like falling in love. When you find it, it fits. It's wonderful. It's there, and you need. And my suggestion is always, obviously, try one of mine. Try the standard one, then try the heritage one, because that's more sensitive, and you can play softer and more carefully, and it's got enough metal about it to make it loud. But of course, what you can do is to put some extra metal on it.
Right.
And we have a thing called a booster, which clips onto the mouthpiece and makes it very, very heavy. And you can then make much more volume if you need.
Right. Oh.
You see, the waveforms as you go along, and you have the place where it goes like this. The sound goes in waveforms, and you have the bits where it's vibrating at the most and where it's vibrating at the least, and that is supposed to be where the mouthpiece is.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't make any difference really, but that's the theory behind it.
Yeah. No, it's fine. And so the best mouthpiece for teens with sensitive skin, I would have thought this would be something that was gold plated.
Probably, yes. We've recently had people asking for with sensitive skin, and I think the gold plating is the best answer so far. But it has been suggested that we do plastic rims, and we might even be doing that.
Right.
That's the next step.
Oh, I was going to say that's one of the questions about other things for the future. Is there a smaller bore than 4 for the cornet?
Well, the 4B is slightly smaller than 4.
Right. Okay. So that answers Derek's
question.
question.
It's interesting, you see, if you listen, there's a TV show on Monday evenings about brass bands.
Oh.
And people have said to me, you know what you've done? Sorry? You know what you've done? They all sound good now. You've revolutionised the sound of the British.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a lovely feeling.
I should imagine. Definitely. And so we need to cover the mute. We've talked mouthpieces, but we haven't actually mentioned how the mutes came about.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. On December the 26th, 1969, Christmas was Boxing Day, of course, and my two little, Stephen, my son, was in the National Youth Orchestra. The two girls were 15 and 13 or something, and they were enjoying Christmas. And I thought, I really must get down to some work. So I had some graph paper, a pair of compasses, and I suggested a sphere, and then flattened the bottom so it would stand out. And then I drew this thing, and then I projected the sides that double the radius of the sphere, and just doodled. And this looked so good. It should work. So first of all, I went to Booths and Hawkes, who was selling my stuff, and I said, if I could make a trumpet mute, what could you sell it for? What could you pay me for it? That's right. So the chap said, about £2. Oh, yeah. So I went to see old Bill Cox, who's a bit of anyway, he was a bit of a character.
He was the guy who made the mouthpieces.
Yeah, I've seen Valparaiso. He'd been in the Merchant Navy as the ship's engineer.
Right.
And his son, Clive, took over after him. I've been trying to get in touch with Clive. I don't know what's happened to him. But they made my mouthpieces for many, many years. And old Bill said, how many do you want? Oh, no, that was something else. Sorry, talking about
the mouthpieces.
What you want is a metal spinner. See, if I didn't know what a metal spinner was. How much do you think they would cost? Ooh, about £2. So I thought, oh, well, never mind. It's not going to work. That was
Yeah.
So I more or less forgot about it. Now, the NSO were recording in the marvellous Kingsway Hall. It was a Methodist church, which they used as a recording studio. I think it's a hotel now, but it was on the junction between Kingsway and Holborn, just very near there. And it was a fantastic recording studio. And that's right. I travelled home on a tube. That's right, because you could park there, but it was easy to go on the tube, you see. So I travelled home on a tube, and somebody left a newspaper on the seat, so I picked it up. And it said, get your metal spinning down here. Metal spinning? That's what old Bill Cropser I wanted. Oh, right. So I tore a bit of paper out from my pocket, got into the house at about 4:45 and called the number. Yes. So I said, I designed trumpet mute. Do you think you can make it for me? Don't know what that is, mate. Give us a drawing and we'll do it for you. So I found out where this place was and took the drawing, and they made 6 trumpet mutes from the drawing. And I got some cork, some old table mats, which I'd sliced up and a round file to make them concave, and I put corks on them. So I got 6 of them, and Audrey, bless her, said, "You're just never satisfied. What are you doing now?" So I took these mutes in to the recording session next day. The trumpets were sitting in front of the trombones, and there was Howard Snell, George Reynolds, and Willie Lang. So I said to Howard Snell, who's a very clever man, what do you think of that? What is it? I said, it's a mute. He said, I know it's a mute. What is it? So I said, it's one I made. Try it. So he put it in. Oh, God, this is fantastic. Hey, George, try this. And they turn around like a chromatic triad, and I let them try these mutes. And I had phone calls from so many trumpet players. And obviously, I was on a winner.
Yeah. So when did it all happen that, everything changed? The Denis Wick company is huge now. So there must have come a point where you just went.
What happened was that Booth and Hawkes were my agents for 35 years. And whatever the merits or demerits of Booth and Hawkes as instrument makers, as musicians, or what, they were big and they were very strong, and they were selling my stuff. And in 2006, I think it was, they went broke, owing me £60,000.
Oh.
I got some of it back.
Yeah.
I got about half of it in the end, various ways of doing it. But I then had to set up on my own. And the chap that I was answerable to, the chief buyer, was Brian Miller.
Right.
So
Brian.
he was at work. He got nothing. Yeah. So he started working for me, although he was drawing unemployment benefit. So I gave him 4 shares in the company, because my wife has got 10. I've got, well, Stephen's got 25. I don't do anything, but it was amazing, and those mutes became legendary, and I was making them from this firm up in Kentish town for 10 shillings each, not £2.
Very big difference.
So
I was
I'm
speaking to
getting them made for 10 shillings, and I found someone to put the cork on.
yeah.
And so I had a couple of those putting corks on for me, and I was making a very healthy profit.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, after Bruises went bust, we had to set it up. So we set up the whole operation where the metal spinners were down in Poole. And Brian went down to Poole and was running the show for me there. And it's marvellous because he's now coming up, I think he's 71, so nearly 72.
Oh, he doesn't look it.
No, he doesn't. And he's full of energy and he does a marvellous job.
Oh, he does. Yes.
So,
That's,
I thought he might be joining in actually, but
I think he's probably attending. I'm sure he's there, but I don't think he was part of the panelist conversation. But maybe
no.
we should have done that. Maybe that might have been nice, perhaps. But yeah, I just want to just do a quick check for any more questions. I've had Grace. So, what do you think the best mouthpiece is for an amateur cornet player who wants to reach the higher notes?
4B.
4B. What's your favourite piece you've ever played?
Favourite piece? Oh gosh, Mahler Third Symphony, I think.
Roger Cut says, "Hello, Dennis. Lovely to see you."
Oh yeah.
And Barry Lobb says, "Yeah, lots of interesting stuff." Yes, and oh yeah, Rob's just saying.
Yes, I've got all those questions here.
Oh, you can see them as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Richard Barrett, advantages and disadvantages of wide rim mouthpieces.
Why do?
Advantages and disadvantages of wide rim mouthpieces.
Well, I think a compromise is the best answer, but everybody's different. I mean, it's a mouthpiece is like a shoe; it's got to fit. You think about that.
Yeah.
And a mute is like a necktie.
Anybody else got any more questions? Feel free to ask them now. And while I've got a few more. Yes. Okay, so we've had some people wanting to know, what advice would you give to them? So a 10-year-old French horn player who would like to become a professional musician, but also a 17-year-old student. So, advice for young musicians.
Well, the main thing is to enjoy it. And the more you enjoy, the more you can practice. Most people don't practice enough. And you ought to get onto a minimum of 2 hours a day, and not 2 hours straight off, 2 lots of 1 hour or 3 lots of half an hour. And you need to be playing much more than most people do.
Yeah. And I suppose if you enjoy what you play, then it comes across in your playing as well, and it just helps the performance, doesn't it?
Well, I think there are obvious musical things which depend on music. The downbeat is always a little pushed compared to the others. So it's strong, weak, or whatever. Strong, weak, medium, weak. Mm-hmm. The idea of inventing your own playing is, I think, useful. A good teacher will help, of course. Yeah. And I think there are more good teachers around now than there ever have been.
If you were starting off today, who do you think your influences would be beyond yourself?
No, really. I think I'd prefer to play another instrument.
Really?
Yeah, completely different instrument. I think I'd probably like to play the bassoon.
That's interesting. Do you think you might have been, if you'd had played bassoon, you may have created accessories for bassoons as well? Then?
Oh, probably, yes. I mean, I did actually play the bassoon. I bought an instrument when I was a student.
Oh, really?
And I got to play Pirates of Penzance, that's right, on the bassoon.
I've played it many times, not on bassoon, but yeah, classic.
But, I think, whatever you like, you should do. Mm-hmm. And some people find, for instance, that playing a trumpet is very, very hard work. And, you know, the cornet is a much easier instrument to play.
Is it?
And so one of the things I've done is to revolutionize the sound of the cornet. It's got a much rounder sound than it used to have.
Mm-hmm.
There was a famous cornet player called Harry Mortimer. Father Fred Mortimer was a brass band conductor, long gone now, but liked a very small mouthpiece because he hadn't got a very good. So there was nobody to tell him, there's nobody to teach, and so if high registers hard, get a small mouthpiece. Not at all. The idea is to reduce the pressure as much as you can.
Right. Right. What is your favourite product, the mouthpiece or the mutes?
Oh, I haven't really had a favourite amongst them. They all function in the way that they do.
Do you think possibly like the first ones, you know?
Yes, what I like is the cornet mouthpieces that have a very dark sound.
I think also that it's affected and it's, you know, it's changed the sound. I think that has to be pretty special, doesn't it, really?
Yes, yeah.
Grace wants to know, what's your favourite brass instrument apart from the trombone? Your favourite brass instrument?
Horn, I suppose. But I mean, they all have their own functions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the modern tuba has got a marvellous repertoire of sound. It's fantastic. And the modern horn, I mean, when I was in the profession, at the beginning, to hear a solo like the Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony horn solo, to play without half a dozen splits, is a good evening, you know. But the standard is so much better now. There's so many good players.
Esther also wanted to say thank you so much for your time today, and she said it's been very useful. I'm just going to do a quick check on Facebook and see if we've had any more in, but I think that's it. So we've gone a little bit over, but not too much. I was worried for a while. I thought it was going to be quite long, but I think we've covered so much. So I'm going to start wrapping up. Oh, Grace also says thank you, Dennis. It's been great. So I just want to say thank you. You know, you must be exhausted because we've asked you so many questions, and it's so nice of you to give your time so generously to us.
I need something to make me think.
Well, you know, we are in strange and interesting times, and it has been really special, you know, for you and for me, just to sort of like, you know, meet and talk about these things. It's really nice to hear other people's lives, especially when you feel, you know, you're on your own and a bit isolated.
Yes,
it's nice to sort of reach in. So it's been, you know, real pleasure to get to know the man behind the brand. So, and I'm sure, well, clearly everyone's saying thank you. So, you know, thank you.
I must tell you one little joke.
Oh, yes.
I discovered, well, I misheard something actually. You must self-isolate. I said, well, I haven't got any Fisolate. How can I possibly sell it? So I've been selling Fisolate. I actually asked Brian Miller if he'd got any Fisolate, and he thought it was quite funny.
Oh yeah, well, we have to laugh during these times.
We do,
yeah. And you listen to music and make music. So I just want to say thank you to everybody tonight that's joined us. You know, whether it's been via Zoom or Facebook. You know, thank you. Your support means that John Packer, that we and I can continue to hold these events. So if you have enjoyed tonight, do let me know and join me in the next one, wherever or whenever that may be. And finally, I've got a little bit of news from John Packer. We're delighted to tell you that our showroom will be reopening on Monday, the 15th of January. We're going to have some restrictions though. So
January?
Oh, sorry, June. Yes, sorry. I've lost a few months.
Well, that's good.
Oh, no, definitely 15th of June. We're going to have some restrictions, so please visit the website in the coming days, where I'll be putting some information about that, or give us a call before you make a journey to see us. But we do have free delivery on our website to mainland UK, so you don't feel like you have to visit us. And I just want to say that throughout the pandemic, similar to Denis Wick, who've been carrying on, a small band of dedicated John Packer staff have carried on working, meaning that we've been able to remain open for business at johnpacker.co.uk. And we've all faced huge challenges, loads of orders, and like me, steep learning curves doing this. But I want to say a huge thank you to all my colleagues for their support. Oh, and I also want to say thank you to Brian, Denis Wick, behind the scenes, who's been really helpful in all this process. So thank you to Brian, and thank you to all my colleagues, and I look forward to seeing them soon. And that is it. Thank you so much for everybody that's joined us. Thank you again, Denis. It's been wonderful. And so
thank
just
you.
Oh,
you've done a wonderful job.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say that. So we'll say farewell now, good night, everybody. And so my thing is good night, stay safe, and keep making music wherever you are, or listen to music.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.